Police custody basics to understand the difference between relevant time and review time. Right. So often confuses people, and also how potentially if you don't understand it you could end up with evidence being excluded. So a person arrives at police custody and the clocks start ticking. Two clocks start. You've got your relevant time clock, also known as your pace clock or your investigation time clock, and you've got your review clock. So the phrase with the TV programme 24 Hours in Police Custody covers the issue around, let's say it's 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, a person arrives at police custody, the clocks start. So in theory, at 9 o'clock, by 9 o'clock on the Tuesday morning, that person's 24 hours is up. And that happens with probably the majority. However, there's numerous exceptions to this. So let's imagine now this person arrives at 9 AM. The clocks start. So we've got the review clock happening, and there's a separate video about reviews, but we need to know what that time is, because by 6 hours from now that person has to have their first review, and also theoretically the investigation should be completed within that first review period. So the relevant clock now, the custody sergeant, they've booked the person in, the person then appears to be unwell, the condition has deteriorated. The healthcare professional is called, the HCP says we need to send them to hospital to be checked. So when the person is leaving police custody, so let's say it's 9:30 now, so they've been in police custody for 30 minutes. As they're leaving police custody, the clock stops. The relevant time clock stops. The review clock keeps going, however, that does not stop. So now the 24-hour period isn't going to be finished at 9 AM on the Tuesday morning, because the clock has stopped. It's 24 hours of investigative time, and while the person is out of custody and not being dealt with as a detainee for investigative purposes, that review clock, so that relevant time clock, stops. So the person comes back now at 10 AM, so they've been out of custody for 30 minutes. It's essential that the custody sergeant restarts the clock, because we've got to get the investigative clock now working. Now imagine the clock doesn't restart, and in this period now, while people haven't realised it's not restarted, an investigation process happens. So either the person is interviewed or the person goes for the intoxilyzer procedure, and it's about an hour later that the sergeant realises they haven't restarted the clock, and now they restart it. This investigation time where evidence has been obtained hasn't been happening during the relevant time clock. So here's why the relevant time is important to understand, because you must have that clock operating when there's any evidence being gathered. And it's 24 hours of evidence gathering time, so long as subject to all the legitimacy of the detention. But your relevant time is 24 hours collectively. So even if at some point, 6 hours later the person is bailed, when they come back answering bail, the clock then restarts again, but it's the same clock because they've got the 24 hours. And the only way then of extending that 24 hours is initially through your superintendent's authorisation, or then looking at going further to court for further hours. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of clarity in relation to that relevant time. And as I've experienced in some cases, the argument in relation to exclusion of evidence, because the evidence has been obtained whilst the relevant time clock has not been working. So as a custody sergeant, you must keep on the ball in relation to your clock, and ensure that when a person leaves, the clock stops, and when they return, the clock restarts, and that no evidence gathering is occurring unless that clock is restarted. Thank you very much.